I didn't realize how much I had learned to ignore until the day I noticed how quiet the house had become. Not peaceful, just empty in a very specific way. Her name is Rachel, mine is Ethan. We've been married for 11 years, long enough that people stop asking questions and start assuming answers. From the outside, our life looks stable. A house in a neighborhood that doesn't change much, 2 cars in the driveway, dinners that happen at roughly the same time each evening, photos on the walls that suggest continuity. But stability can be misleading. It can look a lot like avoidance if you stare at it long enough. Rachel used to hum when she moved around the kitchen, not loudly, just enough to let you know she was there. I don't remember when she stopped, only that one morning I noticed the sound was gone, and nothing had replaced it. I told myself it didn't matter. That was the beginning of a pattern. We started communicating efficiently, short sentences, practical updates, information without texture. "I'll be late. Don't wait up. Did you pay the bill?" Nothing wrong with any of it. Nothing alarming, and that was the problem. People imagine relationships falling apart in obvious ways: raised voices, slammed doors, accusations that arrive fully formed. But that's not how it usually starts. It starts with subtraction. Rachel began working longer hours, at least that's what she said. I didn't question it, not because I trusted her blindly, but because questioning felt unnecessary, like overreacting to something that hadn't actually happened. Trust, I learned later, can become a convenient excuse for silence. We still ate dinner together most nights. We sat across from each other, plates between us, conversations orbiting safe topics: work, news, someone we both vaguely knew. What we didn't talk about was the space between those topics, the pauses that lingered just a little too long, the sense that something important was waiting to be named and being avoided at the same time. Sometimes Rachel would look at me like she was about to say something, then stop, not abruptly, gently, as if reconsidering whether the effort was worth it. I started doing the same. There was a night I remember clearly, even though nothing happened. We were sitting on the couch, the TV on, neither of us really watching. Rachel picked up her phone, checked a message, and smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a reflex, but it didn't include me. She caught herself quickly, put the phone face down, shifted her attention back to the screen. But the moment had already settled somewhere in my chest. I didn't say anything. That was the second thing I ignored. I told myself everyone deserved private moments, that not every smile was a betrayal, that marriage didn't mean constant transparency. All of that was true. And still, something about that smile stayed with me. In the days that followed, I noticed how careful Rachel had become with her phone. Not secretive, just intentional, always within reach, always angled slightly away. Again, nothing dramatic, just enough to make you wonder and then convince yourself you were being paranoid. I began to understand how easy it is to live inside assumptions, how comforting they can be, how they allow you to continue functioning without having to ask questions you're not prepared to answer. One evening, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, Rachel said we should probably plan a weekend away, just to reconnect. Her words were light, casual. I agreed immediately, but something in the timing felt off, like the suggestion had arrived too late, or too early. I wanted to ask what prompted it. I didn't. Later that night, lying in bed, I listened to her breathing slow as she fell asleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the small moments I had filed away instead of examining. The missing hum, the careful smiles, the growing efficiency of our conversations. None of it felt like proof, but it felt like preparation. And for the first time, I wondered whether what I had been calling peace was actually just the absence of resistance, a quiet agreement not to look too closely at what was changing right in front of us. That was the first night I stopped sleeping easily.
The first real change wasn't dramatic, it was logistical. Rachel started adjusting her schedule in ways that required explanation, not because they were suspicious, but because they disrupted routine. A meeting that ran late, a dinner she skipped because she ate at work, a weekend errand that took longer than expected. Each time she offered the explanation before I asked. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me feel like I had already been anticipated. I began noticing how often she filled silence with information, not emotion, not reflection, just data, as if the details themselves were meant to close the subject. I accepted them. We both did. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Nothing intentional, just a meeting that ended ahead of schedule. I expected to find Rachel in the kitchen or the bedroom, moving through the house the way she always did. The house was empty. Her car was gone. That wasn't unusual, but something about the quiet felt different this time. Not settled, but paused, like the house was holding its breath. I stood there longer than necessary, keys still in my hand, listening. There was a faint sound upstairs, a phone vibrating. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the bedroom. Rachel's phone was on the nightstand, face down. The screen lit up briefly, then went dark again. No name visible, just the glow. She must have forgotten it. That thought landed first, practical, harmless. Then another followed. If she forgot it, she wouldn't know who was calling, and if she didn't know, she might hurry back. I hated myself for how quickly my mind went there. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, watching it like it might explain itself. It buzzed again, then stopped. I went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, forcing myself to breathe normally. This wasn't evidence. It wasn't even unusual. People forget their phones all the time. Still, when Rachel came home later that evening, the first thing she asked was whether I'd been upstairs. I said yes. She nodded, too quickly. She asked if I'd seen her phone. I said it was on the nightstand. She exhaled, a small release she probably didn't realize she made. That night, she was more attentive than she'd been in weeks, asked about my day, suggested we watch something together, even laughed, not reflexively, but with intention. I went along with it. Part of me wanted to believe this was the reconnection she'd mentioned earlier, that the distance had been feeling was temporary, manageable, reversible. Another part of me noticed how deliberate everything felt, as if she were correcting something. Over the next few days, I caught myself scanning moments for meaning, a habit I didn't like but couldn't stop. The way she angled her body when she texted, the way she went quiet when certain names came up in conversation, the way she seemed both closer and farther at the same time. I thought about asking her directly. I rehearsed it in my head, casual, non-accusatory, just curiosity. But every version ended the same way, with me sounding like someone who didn't trust his wife, and I wasn't ready to be that person. Trust, I told myself, was built on restraint. So I restrained myself. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Rachel mentioned a colleague she hadn't talked about before. Just a name, no context, no emphasis. I repeated it, asking how long they'd worked together. She hesitated, not long, but long enough. She said a few months. I nodded. That should have been the end of it. But later, lying in the dark, I realized something uncomfortable. She'd been working late, longer than that.
I stared at the ceiling again, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, the heat clicking on, a car passing outside, the quiet rhythm of a life that looked intact from every angle except the one I was standing in. I understood then how doubt doesn't arrive fully formed. It accumulates, quietly, patiently. And once it's there, everything, even innocence, has to work harder to convince you. That night, I didn't confront her, but I stopped assuming.
After that night, I started noticing things I had trained myself not to see. Not because they suddenly appeared, but because I had finally stopped editing them out. Rachel's routines became more precise. She left the house at the same time every morning, came back within predictable windows. It looked like stability. It felt rehearsed. She stopped forgetting small things: keys, wallet, phone. Everything had its place now, as if forgetting had become a risk she couldn't afford. We still talked, we still shared space, but our conversations had lost their randomness. Nothing wandered, nothing drifted. Every exchange felt contained, like it had already been reviewed internally before being released. One evening, she asked if I'd be home late the following Thursday. The question came out casual, but the timing was too exact. I said I wasn't sure. She nodded, then quickly added that she might be out that night too, a team dinner, last minute. The words "last minute" didn't match the preparation in her voice. I said okay. What surprised me wasn't the answer, it was how easily it came out. No tension, no hesitation, as if we were both participating in the same quiet agreement not to dig. I began to understand how people don't always lie to deceive. Sometimes they lie to preserve structure. A few days later, I found myself doing something I had never done before. I checked the phone bill. Not obsessively, not angrily, just once, out of curiosity I told myself I deserved. The numbers were there, timestamps, durations. One number appeared more often than the others, not excessively, just enough to register. I didn't recognize it. I stared at it longer than I should have, then closed the page. I didn't save it, didn't screenshot it, as if collecting proof would mean admitting what I was already circling. That night, Rachel mentioned the same colleague again, this time with a story attached, something minor, a harmless anecdote meant to normalize a name. It worked. Almost. But normalization only matters when something feels abnormal to begin with. I asked her how well they knew each other. She answered immediately. Too immediately. "Well enough," she said. "We worked together." I nodded. That should have settled it. Instead, it clarified something for me. Rachel wasn't hiding a person. She was hiding space. Space that didn't include me. I didn't confront her, not yet. I started paying attention to myself instead, how often I adjusted my tone, how carefully I chose neutral responses, how I delayed questions because I was afraid of the answers. I noticed how tired I felt, not from suspicion, but from restraint. There was a night I almost asked her directly. We were in the kitchen, late, the lights dimmed, the day already over. She stood by the sink, scrolling through her phone, her face unreadable. I opened my mouth. She looked up, and for a brief moment there was something in her expression I couldn't place. Not guilt, not fear, but readiness, as if she was prepared for something to finally be said. I closed my mouth again. She looked back at her phone. That moment haunted me more than anything else, because it told me she knew, not what I knew, but that I was close. From then on, sleep became difficult, not because my thoughts were loud, but because they were organized. They lined up, one after another, forming a picture that no longer required imagination. I understood then that doubt, once acknowledged, changes its function. It stops asking questions, it starts waiting. In whatever was coming next, a confession, a confrontation, or a confirmation, I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. Not anymore.
The Thursday, she mentioned, arrived faster than I expected. All day, I carried a low, steady tension. Not fear, not anger, just awareness. Like my body had accepted that something would shift whether I intervened or not. I came home earlier than planned. Not intentionally, not strategically, just coincidence. The house was quiet when I walked in. The kind of quiet that doesn't surprise you until you realize you were expecting something else. Rachel's shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't on the hook. She hadn't left yet. I went upstairs to change my shirt. As I passed the bedroom, I noticed the bathroom light was on. Steam pressed faintly against the mirror. Rachel was in the shower. I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment. Relief, maybe, or disappointment. Instead, I felt suspended, like the scene hadn't loaded fully yet. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. When she came out, towel wrapped loosely around her shoulders, she stopped when she saw me. Not startled, just recalibrating. She asked if I was home already. I said yes. She nodded and said she was just about to leave. Team dinner. She said it easily, cleanly. I watched her move around the room, opening drawers, choosing clothes, checking her phone. Every motion was efficient, controlled. I asked where the dinner was. She paused, just long enough. She named a place across town, a restaurant I'd never heard her mention before. I asked who else was going. She smiled faintly and said a few people from work. That was when I felt it, the moment when continuing to stay silent would become a decision of its own. I told her I had checked the phone bill. The room didn't change. She did. Her movements slowed. Her shoulders lowered slightly, as if something she had been holding up could finally rest. She didn't deny it. She didn't ask why. She asked how long I'd known. I said I didn't know anything. That was the problem. She sat down. Not defensively, not dramatically, like someone who had reached the part of the conversation they'd been preparing for. She said there was nothing physical. She said that first, as if that were the line that mattered most. Then she said it had started as conversations, long ones, honest ones, the kind she said she hadn't realized she'd been missing until they were happening again. She said she hadn't planned it, that it surprised her too. I listened without interrupting. She said she didn't think of it as betrayal, not at first. She thought of it as relief, as being seen without having to explain herself. That hurt more than if she had said she was unhappy, because unhappiness can be argued with. Relief can't. I asked her whether she planned to leave. She said she didn't know. She said she hadn't decided anything yet, that she was still trying to understand what this meant. For her, for us. I asked if she was still going to dinner. She looked at me for a long time. Then she shook her head. She said not tonight. That wasn't a victory. It didn't feel like one. It felt like a pause, a fragile, temporary suspension of something that was already in motion. We sat there in silence, the weight of everything she hadn't said pressing against everything I hadn't asked. I realized then that the damage hadn't come from what she had done. It came from how long we had both lived beside the truth without naming it. That night, we slept in the same bed. We didn't touch. We didn't talk. And for the first time since this all began, I understood that silence wasn't protecting either of us anymore.
It was just delaying what we were both afraid to face.
The days after her confession didn't feel dramatic. They felt procedural. We moved through the house like people sharing a space temporarily, careful not to collide, careful not to pretend nothing had changed. The truth was there now. Not loud, not constantly referenced, but present in everything. Rachel didn't mention him again. I didn't ask, not because it didn't matter, but because I needed to understand what mattered more. We still ate together. We still discussed schedules, groceries, small decisions that kept life running, but something fundamental had shifted. None of it felt neutral anymore. Every ordinary moment carried weight. I began to notice how often Rachel watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. Not anxiously, not defensively, like she was measuring something. My distance, my tone, my patience. One evening, she asked how I was doing. The question landed differently this time. I told her the truth. I said I wasn't angry in the way she might expect. That anger would have been easier, cleaner. I said I felt disoriented, like the rules of our life had changed without warning, and I was still adjusting to the new gravity. She nodded. She said she felt the same way, that the relief she'd felt earlier had started to dissolve, replaced by something heavier, responsibility, maybe, or consequence. I asked her what she wanted now. She didn't answer immediately. She said she wanted clarity about herself, about us, about whether what she felt was a reaction to stagnation or a sign that something had already ended. I asked whether she was still talking to him. She didn't lie. She said, less, but not at all. That answer hurt more than a clean yes would have, because it meant she was still standing in two places at once. I realized then how exhausting it is to live in a triangle where only two people know its shape. That night, I slept on the couch, not out of punishment, out of necessity. Lying there in the dark, I thought about how easily I had confused loyalty with proximity, how I had believed that being present physically was enough to keep something emotionally alive. Rachel came downstairs later, wrapped in a blanket. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, leaving space between us that felt deliberate. She said she didn't want to lose me. I believed her. That didn't make the situation easier. I told her that wanting not to lose something wasn't the same as wanting to choose it fully, that fear could keep people close long after connection had weakened. She looked at me carefully. She asked if I was saying I wanted to leave. I said I didn't know yet, and that scared both of us. Over the next few days, conversations grew longer, less careful, harder to contain. We talked about the early years, how present we used to be, how much effort we'd stopped noticing once it became routine. She admitted she had felt invisible long before anyone else entered the picture, that the attention she received elsewhere felt less like temptation and more like oxygen. I admitted that I had mistaken her quietness for contentment, that I had stopped checking in because I assumed stability meant satisfaction. Neither of us argued, because at this point, there was nothing left to defend. Eventually, the question we had been avoiding rose to the surface. What now? Rachel said she couldn't keep living in uncertainty, not with me, not with anyone else, that she needed space to understand who she was becoming, separate from guilt, obligation, or momentum. I felt something settle in my chest when she said that. Not collapse, acceptance. I told her I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was competing with a possibility, that even if she chose me tomorrow, the doubt would linger unless we stopped pretending this was temporary confusion. We sat in silence after that. Then she said she should move out for a while. Just for now. No timelines, no promises, just honesty. I nodded. That was the moment I knew the life we had built was no longer intact, not because it had been destroyed, but because it could no longer be returned to its previous shape, and whatever came next would require a decision neither of us could postpone any longer.
Rachel moved out on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays meant anything, just because that's when her friend's place became available. She packed slowly, deliberately, as if she were trying to remember the weight of each object before letting it go. We didn't argue while she packed. We didn't narrate the process. She folded clothes, I stayed out of the way. Occasionally, one of us would ask where something belonged. The tone was neutral, almost kind. That was the hardest part. When she zipped the suitcase, she stopped for a moment, her hand resting on the handle. She didn't look at me right away. She said she didn't know how long she'd be gone. I said she didn't need to. We stood there, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a shared life. Photos, furniture, habits that hadn't yet caught up with the change. The house didn't feel broken, just unfinished. At the door, she hesitated. She said she was sorry, not for what she'd done, but for how long she had avoided being honest about what she needed. I told her I was sorry too, for how long I had mistaken calm for connection, for assuming silence meant stability. We hugged. Not desperately, not briefly, just enough. After she left, I sat alone in the living room longer than I intended to. I didn't turn on the lights. I let the evening settle around me, noticing how the house held sound differently now. Days passed, then weeks. Rachel and I spoke occasionally, messages that were careful, respectful, restrained, updates without intimacy. Neither of us asked the questions that would have made things easier or harder. I began to understand that endings aren't always loud. Sometimes they're administrative. Life didn't fall apart. It recalibrated. I learned how much time I had been filling with assumption. How many conversations I'd postponed because the present felt manageable. How often I'd chosen predictability over presence. One afternoon, I ran into Rachel unexpectedly. A grocery store we both used to frequent. A familiar aisle. A moment neither of us had rehearsed. She looked different. Not transformed, just aligned. Like someone standing in a posture they hadn't realized they'd been avoiding. We talked briefly, about nothing important, about everything implied. She said she was learning to trust her own voice again. I said I was learning to listen, not just to others, but to the discomfort that tells you something matters. Before we parted, she asked if I regretted not confronting her sooner. I thought about it. I said regret wasn't the right word, that I understood now why I hadn't asked, because I was afraid of changing the shape of my life. She nodded. She said fear makes very convincing arguments. That stayed with me. Months later, alone in the house that no longer felt like a compromise, I realized something quietly profound. The betrayal hadn't been the turning point. The turning point had been honesty, delayed, imperfect, unavoidable. Rachel and I didn't fail because someone else entered the picture. We failed because we stopped choosing awareness over comfort. I don't know if she and I will ever find our way back to each other. What I do know is this: Love doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes when left unattended. And trust isn't broken by a single act. It's weakened by the space where truth should have been spoken sooner. If I ever build something like this again, I won't confuse peace with silence. I won't wait for certainty before asking the question that matters. And I won't ignore the first thing that feels off, just because addressing it might change everything. Because sometimes, change is the most honest outcome there is.